Hello, everyone, and welcome back. In the previous section, we had a look at the idea of simple interest. Simple interest fundamentally is only interest on principal. So when you borrow money, you only pay interest on whatever the principal is worth. However, and this is a large point, compound interest occurs when the interest is added to the principal at the end of each compounding period and is included in further calculations of interest. So compound interest means is both is interest on both principal and interest. And so you might be thinking, oh, this doesn't sound very good. Well, when you're investing money, it's fantastic. However, if you owe money like credit card debt, car loans, and such, compound interest is what's causing this. It's interest both on the principal of what you borrowed and also on the interest itself. So some people call compound interest is sometimes called interest on interest. Okay. And so here's the formula that we're going to be using. It is capital A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of n. That little n is an exponent. So if I were to draw out what it looks like, I would say that A is equal to P bracket. Now it's a regular 1 plus sign I, and there's a little n up here. Okay? And so this forms an acronym. We call it PAIN, where, and some of these will be familiar, P is still the principal or initial value. So this is our starting value. A is the accumulated amount or future value. So this is what we end up with at the end. I is the interest rate per compounding period. We'll touch more on what this means, but it still means, part of it means converting percents to a decimal. N is the number of compounding periods. But again, primarily this starts off with years. Okay, and so we're going to be having a look at the structure. There's some new terms we must know. So in these questions, you start to see things like this: compounded annually, or semi-annually in this case. Well, what does this mean? Well, the thing is that our interest on interest isn't merely going to be, we can calculate our interest not just on a yearly basis. A yearly basis means actually nothing changes. Annually means once a year, and we don't do anything with our I and N values. So these I and N don't change. However, if something says semi-annually, that means it's twice per year. So our I term must be divided by 2, and our N term must be multiplied by 2. Quarterly means 4 times per year, and so we must divide by 4 and multiply by 4. Monthly is 12 times per year, so we divide by 12, multiply by 12. And I made little corrections here because I'm not sure why I wrote the wrong thing, but these things happen. Okay, so these are all the information we need to know in order to continue. And so the kind of questions that we'll be looking at is, we deposit money into a bank account, we wait a certain amount of time, and we see how much comes out at the end. With simple interest, this always meant that we only found out the interest. But for this compound formula, we actually get the total amount at the end. Okay? And so before we begin, what we had ended up practicing was, and this is quite difficult the first time you do this, is we need to be able to type in things like this into your calculator. Okay? And so I heavily encourage you to do this now to make sure you get the same thing I do. And so how do I end up with this? Well, note that this whole time I've been using the standard calculator, and now I've actually enlarged Yeah, I've enlarged my calculator so it's a little bit easier to see. So here I'm going to click over to scientific. And now I have here some extra things, extra brackets to know. So I'm going to be able to type this thing in. So to do that, I need the first thing is 400 bracket 1 plus 0.04 divided by 12, close the bracket, xy 24. And so I get this 433 number. Didn't make it any bigger, but that's okay. And so again, I was going to write this down, and I wrote it down here. So again, how did I do this? Well, okay. And so what we want to do is take our 400 bracket 1 plus 0.04 divided by 12, close the bracket to the power of 24. And I got my answer here. So you get a lot of decimal places, but and again, we perform the normal measures of rounding. So this is 433.25. Since the 7 is 5 or greater, we round up to 0.26. Okay? And so typing this into your calculator yields this result. So now let's have a look at some questions. Now I have a website link here, but we'll come back to that in a bit. So what do we do here? So we will determine how much money you will have if $500 is invested for 6 years at 4% per year compounded semi-annually. So the first thing we need to do is to write down our formula. So this is the formula that we're going to use. So this will be A is equal to P times 1 plus I. And for the exponent, I'm just going to use this little n up here like this. Okay. And so if you want to, you can also draw this out by hand. You could say A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the exponent of little n like this. That'll also work just fine. Okay. And so what do we know about this question? Well, how much money do we start with? Well, we start with this $500. So P will be equal to 500. My little I will be what? Now, if you notice in the last example, and it's just coincidentally, capital I means interest on a whole thing. We like little I to represent the interest rate. So it's going to be this 0.04. Okay. So if you were to take 4 and divide it by 100, you will get 0.04. Okay. Oh, should say. Do we know what the final amount is? No. So we'll put a question mark there. And our n value will be equal to the number of years. So n will be equal to 6 in this case. So I'll put little notes here beside this in a different color. So P is the starting amount, which we have is 500. A is going to be what we end up with. I is going to be the interest rate per compounding period. And N is going to be the number of years multiplied by the number of compounding periods. Now, if you've been having a look here, we used this 500, like that's been used. We used this 6 years, that's been used. And we've used this 4%. But we haven't used this though. We haven't used this semi-annually. And this is where this comes in here, where we need to take our I and divide it by some number. So semi-annually means twice per year. So the I value must be divided by 2, and the N value must be multiplied by 2. So here, we take our I value and divide it by 2, and we take our N value and multiply it by 2. So 6 times 2 is just 12. And so it is. Now, what we need to do now is insert this into our formula. And at this point, I do like to color code these, put this in blue, to say that, hey, this is kind of, we have to account for the compounding period. So we'll put this in blue as well. Okay. And so A will be equal to, instead of P, we're going to write 500, 1 plus. Now, instead of I, we're going to write this 0.04 divided by 2 to the power of 12. So instead of n, we're going to still have this little arrow here. That's going to be our exponent. And instead of n, we're going to write 12. And so this is now what we're going to type into our calculator. Okay. And again, I do encourage you at this point to try this out on your own to make sure you get the same thing I will. Okay. So again, I'm going to just copy down exactly what I've written here into my calculator. 500 bracket 1 plus 0.04 divided by 2, close the bracket, xy 12. And I'm going to get the 634.12, and it ends with a 0. Since 0 is 4 or less, I round down. And so I'm going to get this as my result. So again, just to run through this, I take my 500 bracket 1 plus 0.04 divided by 2, xy 12. And so I get that same result. And to get to this screen, all I did was, like your normal calculator looks like this. I clicked up to these 3 lines up here, clicked on it, and changed it to scientific. And I was able to get more of these options. Okay. Okay, so you might see a little bit of an altered view. That's okay, these things happen. And so if you're able to type this directly into your calculator, no problem, you should be okay. Now, if you are having troubles, what you can do instead, and you see now I've actually split my screen in two, is there is a calculator that'll do this for you. It's just that you have to be a little bit more careful with it. So if you click on this, you will be brought over to this future value, something called OMNI calculator. And what you can do is actually do the same thing. So here, this is a future value calculator for this kind of question. And it's going to ask you the same kind of questions here. So we can copy most of our information from over here. So the present value, how much we start with, will be $500. The interest rate in this case, we can see is 4. This screen unfortunately has ads, so we have to accept this for now. The number of years that we're talking about is 6 years. So I will put 6 years here. And it wants to know the compound frequency. That means how often is it compounded? So in this case, it happens to be semi-annual. And so here we call this half yearly. It's the only one that's kind of off. And so when you type this in, you can see that we will get the exact same answer that we did when we did this by hand as the same as when we did this using the computer. Okay. And so what you can do then is you can copy and paste your results. And I just took a screenshot of this to show that this was my answer down here. So it is faster if you do this by just using your computer or mouse. Or what you can do is go to this calculator and type in these results as well. And this will work for you. Okay. Okay. So I have linked, I just put my screen back for editing purposes. The calculator you can use is here. And I've also posted it at the bottom here as well. Okay. So let us try out this next one. We have Alice, who borrowed $5,000 to start a small business. The interest rate on the loan was 9% per year, compounded monthly. What is the amount of the loan after 4 years? Okay. And so this will use the same kind of thing as before. So it'll use this formula. Okay. And so the interest rate for this we see is 9%. So if we take 9 divided by 100, we will get 0.09. And we're going to write down what we had from before, our pain. And sometimes you might not be able to make it a lowercase I, but that's okay. And so let's highlight all of the important information. This $5,000 is important. The interest rate on the loan was 9% per year. This is important. It's compounded monthly, so we will need this piece of information. And we're talking about 4 years. Okay, so there's our 4 pieces of information. And so remember, the p-value is what we start with. So we are starting with 5,000. We don't know how much money we're going to get at the end, so we'll put a question mark. The interest rate is going to be the 0.09, and the end value is going to be the amount of the loan, or how many years it's going to be. So this will be 4. Now, again, we've used the 5,000, we've used the 9%, we've used the 4, but we haven't yet used this monthly. And so what we found from before was that when this was semi-annually, we divided by 2 for the I, multiplied by 2 for the N. Now for monthly, that means we divide by 12 and multiply by 12. So here we will take our I value and divide it by 12, and we'll just leave it. That's okay. And we'll take our N value and multiply it by 12. And so if we do this, we will get 48. So 4 times 12, just to show you, does equal 48. Okay. My recommendation, always figure out what the N value is. Never figure out what the I value is. Just leave it. We don't need to do anything with that. Okay. So now we're going to be using the above formula. A stays the same. P, equal sign stays the same. Instead of P, we shall write 5,000. 1 plus, instead of I, we will write this 0.09 divided by 12. And we'll put the exponent. Now, instead of this N, we will write 48. And I suppose I will color code these from before just to make sure that these will match for us, because I do like when they match. Okay. So A will be equal to, okay. So now we're going to type this into our calculator, 5,000 bracket 1 plus 0.09 divided by 12, close the bracket to the power of 48. And so I'm going to get the 7,100 number. Now, since the number on the end is 5 or greater, we shall round up. So this will become 7,157.03. Okay. If you wanted to use the OMNI calculator, again, I put the link here for you. What you can do here is you can type in the same information as before. So now instead of $500, we now have $5,000. Our interest rate we can see is 9%. So we don't put the decimal here, we just put what the number is. This time around, we're talking about 4 years. So we'll put a 4 here. And it's compounded how often this time? Well, instead of half yearly, it's now going to be monthly. So we will switch this to become monthly. And if you notice, we get the same answer as before. And so if you want to use the calculator here, what you can do is in your search bar, we can type in snippet, go to snipping tools, click on new, and you can move this out of the way and you can highlight the information that you found. And here it is. And then you can come over here and paste it into your doc by clicking Control V. So here you can click, or I should say press Control and V to paste into the OneNote. Or if you wish, you could copy down the answer here at the bottom. Like this will also be fine. Okay. With this in mind, and also this is quite large, so we could shrink that down a bit, and that's okay. What I'd like you to do now is I would like you to try out example 4. You invest $5,000 into an account that earns 4% per year, compounded quarterly. How much money is in the account at the end of 30 years? So go ahead and try this one out now, and we will take this up in a couple of minutes to see how you did. Okay, let's see how you did. So for this one here, again, we're going to use the same formula from before. This A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of N. Now, we'll highlight our key pieces of information. This $5,000, it is 4% per year, compounded quarterly, and we want to know at the end of 30 years. So we will write down our PAIN, the acronym. And so it is. Okay. Now we start with $5,000. So we write that down. The amount at the end, we don't know. So we're going to go figure that out. The interest rate is going to be 4%, so it's 0.04. And our N value is going to be 30. Now we've used the 5,000, we've used the 4%, and we've used the 30 years. We must now use the quarterly. So how much was quarterly? Well, when we scroll back up, quarterly is 4 times a year. So our I value gets divided by 4, and our N value is multiplied by 4. And so we take our I value and divide it by 4, and we take our N value and multiply it by 4. It's worth noting that 30 times 4 is going to be equal to this 120 number. Okay, and just for color coding purposes, I will color code this blue, and I'll color code this dividing by 4 and multiplying by 4. And I guess I should do the whole thing. Okay. And so using our formula from above, we say A is equal to, instead of P, we will write 5,000. Instead of I, we will write this 0.04 divided by 4. The exponent part stays the same, and instead of N, we will write 120. And if you so choose, you can put like spaces in here to make it a little bit easier to read. Okay. So A will be equal to what? Well, we take our 5,000, bracket 1 plus 0.04 divided by 4, close the bracket, to the power of 120. And so we're going to get this 16,000 number. So it's 16,501.93. The number at the end is a 4, which is 4 or less. And so we will round down. And so this will be our answer that we get. Okay. Again, to show you how this works, we take 5,000 multiplied by 1 plus 0.04 divided by 4, close the bracket, XY 120. And so we get this 16,000 number. Okay. If you wish to use the OMNI calculator, again, the OMNI calculator link is up here, and I also put it in the homework questions as well. We type in the same information as before. It's still 5,000, but now it's going to be 4%. So we're going to switch this 9 to a 4. And it's compounded quarterly for 30 years. So we're going to change this 4 years to 30, and we're going to change the quarterly here to this number. And if you can, as you can see here, we do get the same answer in the end. So I can take a copy paste, a snippet of this, and paste this into my answer to show you what it looks like on the OMNI calculator. Okay. And so with that, you'll be able to now do the homework questions. Okay. So you can either write this out by hand, which is what we came up with, or you could be typing these things into the OMNI calculator. It's just that you're going to need to create a snippet of this to show me your solutions for this. Okay. So here's some questions. A $2,000 investment, a loan, such and so forth. And I also put the answers below here. So these answers for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the answers to these questions. Because again, the problem I found with this unit isn't that like the answer is not the important part. It's just confirming what the answer should be. So you should be getting these as a solution as well. So go ahead and try out these questions, and I'm going to give you plenty of time because I want to make sure that we're able to do this. I'm aiming to take these up by the end of class.